And the other sad thing is a lot of things are still based on you have to know they're there to get access to it.
Right.
Versus somebody just coming to you and saying,
here's a book with everything in it that you need.
And so, even dealing with the county and, a social worker, they're called SSAs. They're basically a social worker. Naomi has one through SummitED now. Being Brazilian, there's a thing called a jeitinho Brasil. So, and it's not about bulldozing our way through things. It's just about finagling to get what we want, to get things done. And oftentimes that could be sweet talking and, a little bit of flair and whatever. And sometimes it is like, boom, you're going to do this. And so I definitely have always had that mentality. And so for Naomi, I would just keep digging and digging and digging. But a lot of parents don't think that way. People just don't operate that way. Whatever, they might be overwhelmed in other ways. So again, like it's even now, like I have a friend of mine whose child was diagnosed the same time that Naomi was. I've given her tips throughout the times, but like just recently, like a year ago, I think a year and a half ago, she still didn't know that there was certain funding help that she could get because of, her son just hasn't developed in the same way that Naomi has and needs more support and more help even, and is more exhausting and overwhelming at times than Naomi can be. And she doesn't even know. So I'm like, you need to call your SSA. You need to tell her you want A, B, and C, that she needs to get this looking for you. But if you don't have somebody to tell you these things, because there's nobody telling you that. Yeah.
You just live
and
with
they
it.
just get by, these organizations, these doctors or therapists, they just kind of get by doing the bare minimum. And if you aren't the squeaky wheel, but a lot of times in this situation, parents don't know what to be the squeaky wheel about. So
that's got to be so frustrating. And it feels like I'm already sitting here thinking, gosh, what could we do? What could we do to put in place just the resource piece of it? Something where they could go to a website and find all the resources that they need, and who you need to contact, and with questions, a couple of fact sheets that you could look at, FAQs. And it just feels like there's just something simple you could put together for parents to get them started and understanding what all is available.
The other thing that I find interesting for lack of a better word with autism is how discussing why the numbers are going up and why children develop autism, and about 30% is genetic based. There's a gene situation with what they call the Fragile X syndrome, and that accounts for about 30% of the cases, maybe 25%. And that is an actual genetic situation, but autism is not genetic in the same way that Down syndrome is genetic.
Right.
Where it's very specific. The percentage of the population that has Down syndrome has stayed, the same number kind of thing. It's genetic in the sense, the same way that if you might test, do a blood work or do gene testing, and you have the variant that maybe makes you more susceptible to breast cancer or more susceptible to this. It's genetic in that way, but it's not genetic in the sense, oh, you're definitely going to have autism because of this, And there is a component, and talking about the gene situation, it blows my mind that we're willing to test people for a genetic situation, or markers for different types of cancer or something. And we'll tell a 25-year-old woman, hey, you have the gene variant for this breast cancer and you should just, get your tatas cut off to avoid it. And people will do it, which is fine. But then if you say, hey, you have the genetic, disposition to this and this, for example, the MTHFR mutation, which means that you probably your body methylation process isn't good, which means that your body doesn't really detox very well. So maybe it's not the best thing to like bombard your body with a bunch of toxins all at once. Does that mean that you should just, say don't ever do certain things? No, but maybe it means that we have to look into that at least more. And when it comes to autism, they're not willing to have those conversations.
Yeah.
They're not willing to say,
it's like taboo.
Yeah. And I don't understand that. It blows my mind because we're willing to say, hey, cigarettes can cause cancer, so don't smoke cigarettes, or we're willing to say you have this genetic marker, so just get, a mastectomy like off the bat, even though you're only 22. The other day I saw something where they were talking about microplastics and how those numbers are coming up and how much it's coming up in our bodies now. And they were saying something about how it accounts for 20-something% of like birth defects or something crazy. But I'm like, how are we willing to talk about microplastics and how that could potentially affect a child's development?
Right.
But if you bring up anything with autism, even if it's, the whole Tylenol thing, even if things at the surface sound ridiculous and maybe there's truth to it and maybe there's not, but we aren't even willing to entertain the conversation.
Yeah.
We're not even willing to say, well, the data you're showing me is bullshit. And no, I don't think that's true. But you know what? Let's dig into it and see.
Right.
Because
Let's
we
talk
have to
about it.
find something. These numbers have to stop. It just keeps going up. Something is off. Let's just find something and dig into everything. And for any other health issue, we're willing to say, sweeteners can cause cancer or this or, stop that. And we're willing to look into these environmental factors or these manufactured products and to say, don't consume this, or,
Right.
if you have this genetic disposition, then you have cholesterol issues, so don't eat these things. We're willing to do that, but not with autism. With autism, it's just, nope, you can't help it. There's no reason why it's increasing. It's all genetic. You can't think about anything. And the whole concept of also telling parents around the whole Tylenol thing that came out last year, I saw all these posts, most of them by people who I personally know that do not have a child with autism. They might be connected to the autism community in some other fashion. They're a therapist or they're a teacher, but none of them had an actual child with autism. And one of their arguments was always pointing out how parents don't need to feel guilty that because they made a thing. As a parent of a child with autism who regressed, so she wasn't born that way, and who I can think of a handful of potential situations that occurred, that might have caused her to regress. I don't dwell on, oh man, I'm such a horrible parent. It goes back to that Maya Angelou quote, like, when you know better, you do better.
Right.
I can't judge the decisions that I made for her, thinking that I was doing what was best for her when I didn't know any better. But also, if we're willing to talk about it, then now I can make better decisions moving forward. And maybe I can share my story so that people behind me can make better decisions. But when it comes to autism, you can't have that conversation.
And you've had, 5 kids. And I'm sure that your decisions for those children after her, you were really much different in maybe how you handled certain things as you
extremely
learned.
different with Mariah. By the time she was diagnosed, I had already had, Eli and all of that. But yeah, I mean, there were health decisions that we changed, even with my ex-husband, that I completely changed because of, of Naomi's situation and from that point on. But then even with Mariah, she literally didn't have one, like, with not artificial sugar, processed sugar. We didn't even give her a fruit until she was about 14 months old.
Yeah.
We only let her have, she was breastfed the longest because another thing that they don't talk about, and I learned with her, she had a lip tie and a tongue tie, which all my kiddos did, which made them difficult to breastfeed. But again, that's not like a mainstream medicine thing.
But you could get that taken care of.
Yeah. And so I went to see a nursing specialist with her, and she right away was like, oh, she has a lip tie, tongue tie. Take her to this dentist. You'll have to pay out of pocket, but if you get it done, it'll be fine. And it was night and day breastfeeding.
Right.
And then I checked all of my teeth, all of my other kids' mouth, and sure enough, they all had it, which is why I couldn't get them to latch well, and it would hurt me and all this other stuff. So she was breastfed the longest. So that helped because then that immediately gave her, a lot more nutrition from that perspective. But yeah, she didn't have any fruit until she was even about 14, 15 months old. We just kept it with veggies, breast milk, the girl loved steaks. It was hilarious. Like, it was very young, like 10 months old or so, we have all these videos. She loved steak and she loved avocados. But yeah, and then we introduced her to fruit, which was the first time she had sweet things. And then she never had a piece of cake until she was almost 2.5.
Oh my gosh. But that's great.
But, we didn't know any of that. I didn't know any of that.
Right. Right.
Like
Most parents don't.
Yeah, I was giving my kids the kid-friendly yogurt and
Sure.
And then now it's like, oh crap, look at how much sugar this thing has.
Right.
So.
Well, it's funny because even you did that when you came to the hospital. I was getting a lot of sweeteners for your water.
Yes.
And we started looking at the backs of those and we were like, oh my gosh, there's so much sugar in so many.
Well, I remember even before that, one of the races that we did, and you're like, I have this great new product,
and
liquid IV. And I'm like, girl,
no,
look at the back of that.
No. But it's, people just don't know. And the effects of it, perhaps even, like, okay, so it's great. It's great if you're running a race because you can probably, but it's not going to help you during that race.
Right.
It's going to give you that spike and then the drop,
Yeah.
know? And that's the problem with it. It's not giving you that stuff that's going to make you feel good the whole time, including when you finish.
Yeah.
And they're out there all over the place. There's so many different things, but if you're not reading the box and don't know what to look for.
Well, because so many things market themselves as the new thing now, I think, is to either say you're gluten free or organic, right? And then
Right.
people have automatically, oh, it's organic. Okay, it can be organic and still have a bunch of organic sugar in it. Like, and it's still cane processed sugar, not like fructose or, something naturally occurring. So one of the things to look at, um, my body does really well with keto. So I don't do keto 24/7, but I do try to stay low sugar in general. And one of the things that I do look at for Mariah more and the kids more is, what's added sugar.
Yeah.
Because you can get, I can give them an organic fruit pouch or something. And as long as there's no added sugar, then at least the sugar content is naturally occurring to the fruit. But even that, I limited a lot with her.
You think grapes are great. They're so good. But oh boy, the sugar in grapes is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, with Naomi, so if you're watching this, to kind of what's bullet point it for you or summarize it, that's the word I was looking for.
okay.
I think if moms know best, and so follow your gut instinct. I was told for 6 months, my pediatrician, the third time that I asked her, this is not the same child, something is off. She was like, yeah, I guess I could see maybe her speech seems it's less than the last time I saw her. And you are pregnant with your fourth, like maybe, get her some speech therapy. And she gave me a recommendation for two, and they were two really good ones. So of course they both had 3+ month waiting lists.
Right.
So it took me another 3+ months before she started doing that. But then all she asked me, she goes, does she smile when you walk into the room and acknowledge you? And I was like, well, yeah. And I was Naomi's like favorite person, and I still kind of am her person. She's like, oh yeah, then she's not autistic. She just had this super outdated,
wow,
training on autism. And I don't know that it's gotten much better with general pediatricians.
I was going to say, because back then, again, I didn't even know what it was when you told me. And I think it was so new, but yeah, then they had the generic stuff. But like you said, it hasn't really progressed as much as you hoped.
I mean, the doctor that we went with, Dr. Rossignol, who was in Florida and California. Now he flip-flopped where he's mostly in California and in Florida just a little bit. He shares his story where both of his boys are autistic. They're a little bit older than Naomi. I want to say that they're probably 2 or 3 years older than Naomi, maybe 4 years older than Naomi. But he had a family practice. He was a PCP family practice doctor. His wife was an RN. And he's like, we had no idea. My son had these classic symptoms. I remember coming home from work. He's like, I've been in my practice at that point over 10 years, seen, all ages. And I remember coming home from work and seeing my oldest spin around the living room and being impressed. That is so amazing he can do that and not get dizzy, and not having a clue that was one of the classic signs, just like the ticks and the movement. And, his son used to line up all his cars, and he's like, we just thought like, wow, that's so impressive, And
well, because they look like strengths as opposed to something that looks off. So what are your points to moms out there that are struggling?
I would say, just you have to be your child's number one advocate. You can't count on what your doctor tells you. You can't count on what your therapist is telling you. For Naomi, I have built a great team around her, but there has been people that I've shied away from. There has been people that won't stay on her team because I am demanding and won't just take a surface level thing. The other big thing I think to encourage people, and this has become a point that somewhat I get frustrated about nowadays, when talking about, people, I'm on social media, I'm posting things on social media all the time. And, it's inevitably, and by this day and age, social media has been along now for 20 years.
Right.
You would think that you wouldn't have to verbalize saying, hey, those are my highlight reels. That people are aware of that now. Not necessarily because I'm trying to make my life look better than it is, but how do you film like, when shit is imploding? You can't really, you're not really doing that. So it's not intentional. By some people might be intentional, but it's not intentional for most people. It's just what social media is. It's meant to be the highlight reel. So if you see Naomi, I'm posting, she has a job and she and I are, traveling together, and she does dance and horseback riding. I mean, she is doing great. But in between all these videos and moments, and I even do try to note this when it happens. So she and I just went to um, Universal Studios because she had a cheer competition, and we went with her special needs cheer team to Orlando, and she competed at Disney, but she didn't want to do Disney. She wanted to do Universal Studios. So we stayed there and did the parks there. She had been talking about it for months, so excited about it. And as much as she travels with us in all sorts of ways, and this girl has gone with us to Brazil and Bahamas, and we take road trips all the time. When she wanted to do the Disney race in January, as you know, and she did wine and dine with us in 2023. For the first time ever, when we were at the airport in January for this culmination of this trip that she'd been talking about for months, and she picked all of our costumes, as you know, the whole shebang, she had this massive meltdown. I mean, to the point where Isaac dropped us off and I had to call him. I think you have to come back and come get her because we can't take her. I mean, she literally is this huge, 5'6", 160, 70-pound adult, 19 years old, and literally on the floor like a cartoon, like in a movie, like kicking and punching on the floor 45 minutes before we're supposed to board our plane, and just kept saying that she wasn't going to go. I think it's because she's starting to get a bit more anxiety about traveling at times, and she can't really verbalize that as much. And so then she just has these behavior outbursts, even though she's traveled. She's very well traveled. And then, just now when we went to Universal, again, she had this whole list and all this stuff. And I know what her expectation was. She just wants to do, she's becoming a bit more set in her ways. And in some ways, as she has improved cognitively, it has created new challenges because she's become more aware of what is happening. She becomes more aware of her autonomy, that she can have a say in something. She's become more aware that, her size alone can impact on what she, people force her to do or not, that kind of a thing. So it's brought its own challenges. And in between some of the highlights that you might see on my Instagram from us at Universal Studios, we went to go ride the Cat in the Hat ride, which is this little kiddie ride. It's a nothing ride. And she just was so anxious about it. We had to, she had a couple of meltdowns. We had to get out of line. We had to let a few people go in front of us. We tried, the third time that I tried to get her on the ride is finally when she went on the ride. And then she went on it and she loved it, which I knew is what was going to happen. And in contrast, she struggled to get on Cat in the Hat, but then she goes on this humongous roller coaster. But part of it's because she can see the roller coaster. Yeah. All of it's outside. The Cat in the Hat is a little bit unknown. And she might remember it from when she was little. I don't know. But a lot of parents will give in to that. And I've actually am seeing this a little bit even with like my grandma with Alzheimer's. They get these ideas in their head, or they get anxious about things that they're not able to work through. And the easy thing to do is say, fine, we're not going to do this.
Exactly.
But then the problem is you just feed into whatever the anxiety is, right? Because you didn't push it. And so if she's thinking like, well, this is going to be really scary, or this is going to be really overwhelming, because they didn't do it, you're almost affirming that thought.
That good. I didn't have to do that because it was scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you're not saying that, but I think their brain kind of affirms it that way. And then they become, and this is what has happened to some of my friends as children who were diagnosed around the same age as Naomi or a few years behind Naomi. I have seen this happen. And it's happening with my grandma with Alzheimer's in Brazil. They then start to do less and less and less.
Yeah.
Because they become more and more anxious about new things. Or things that they used to do, and now
so
they
won't
don't
explore anything new.
Right.
Oh my
But
gosh.
with Naomi, I will push through, and I'll push through the behaviors, and it's embarrassing, it's awkward, or it can even be scary because she's a strong, big girl, and she'll come at me like we have holes in multiple walls and doors in our house because she will come after. But I always still push her through it. And the Universal, we went to all three of their parks and the water park. And it was a great example because had I given in that first day at the Cat in the Hat ride, she probably would have done less and less.
Yeah.
But I kept pushing her through every single ride. And then I was able to go, You did the Haggard roller coaster yesterday. Remember the roller coaster falls? Like it literally falls. Do you remember that? And you were fine. This ride is going to be fine. Let's go. Like,
Yeah.
and then I was also able to be like, Nay, you have liked everything that I've made you do. Like, I know you. I want what's best for you. I know what you like. I'm not going to make you do something that's going to hurt you. I'm not going to make you do something that you don't like. You've done this, this, and this, and this, and this ride so far, and you've loved all of them. Like,
Right.
just trust me. Let's go do this ride. And then she would, then it got easier and easier for her to do a ride.
Right. It's
And
a behavioral thing. That's
yes.
a repetition.
And I think a lot of parents, and I get it. Like I was in the trenches, I had 4 kids, ages 5 and under, an unsupportive ex-husband in marriage. I was essentially a single parent. My ex-husband was a paycheck was the contribution that I got kind of thing. And, just a lot going on. Like I get it. It's exhausting. And I didn't do this every scenario, every time, but I would say, 85% of the time I would pick those battles with her and see them to the end. And now at 19 and still having these new experiences with her and pushing through these challenges. It's not like, people tell me all the time now, like, well, you're so lucky.
Oh, gosh.
Or, well, Naomi this. It's like, right. But Naomi could have not been here.
Right.
And so I do urge you with, if you can get a good team around you, some good support system, both with friends and family, but even with providers, you will find, you might have to go through a few, but you will find great ones out there. Push through because it's worth it. It's worth the battle.
Yeah.
Where her life is today. And then just dig, either try to talk to people that who have kids with autism, especially kids who you see or have heard that they're doing well. Try to talk to those parents and ask them for the resources. And then, like you said, the holistic stuff. Right. I can't stress enough how important that has been for Naomi, changing her diet, Naomi's not medicated at all, which a lot of people who knew her back then and see her now, the ones that have been, there's people in her life that have been in her life as providers and things for, 10 plus, 12 plus years.
Right.
But the ones that maybe saw her a little bit at the beginning and then see her now, I mean, this girl has come a long, long way.
It's crazy.
I mentioned in the podcast that I did with Leo last year on Naomi, where her initial provider that met her at autism camp, Naomi, this is how bad it was for when you see my social media or her social media. When Naomi was diagnosed at 3.5, I took her to this autism specific summer camp and they walked her out at the end of the day telling me she doesn't fit the mold to really be here.
Oh, shoot.
And they were kind enough to not say she can't come back. They just said, we can make accommodations and provide care for her during the time that you registered her for, but it's not going to look the way that, the pamphlet and whatever you were explained is because she's not at that level. She was very bad. People, I think, oh, she's just mildly autistic. It's like, no.
She was bad.
And I mean, the amount of poop that was smeared all over my house all the time, like
the walls,
things that were broken. I mean, it, even when she was 11, 12, she was choking Joelle and Eli all the time. I remember one night I was in my garage. They had all gone to bed. It was supposed to, they should have all been in bed. And I was trying to clean out my garage and I was in the garage for like half an hour, 45 minutes. And I happened to come in. And if I hadn't, she was literally choking Joelle and Joelle was just too small at the time, because they were 9 and 10 and she was just bigger and stronger at the time. Who knows what could have happened if I hadn't come in, because they were supposed to be in bed and asleep and they don't even sleep in the same room. They had separate bedrooms at the time. So no, it wasn't easy. So when you see her today, just know that it's possible for your child with a lot of dedication, a lot of work, and a lot of intention, but it's possible and it's worth it.
The one story that stands out to me about something about her that was really unique, you took her to see the dolphins and she kept talking about a fish that she was seeing. She kept saying this fish and you were like, oh, okay. And she kept talking about it, talking and naming it. And it was some really odd fish. And the next thing you know, the guy that was there that was showing them, he said that that's the fish.
Yeah.
Like she knew the name of this fish because she'd studied it before. Is that right?
She was always obsessed with animals. So when she regressed and she stopped being able to call her brother's name, she used to call Isaac. She used to say a whole bunch of different words, mommy, daddy, and other things that she could label. And all of that stopped. She lost all of that. She didn't lose labeling animals. and she was obsessed with Diego, this TV show Diego that, was Dora's cousin, and he was always about animals. And so, yeah, so Naomi couldn't say mommy, but she could label a no copy a pygmy marmoset, and she would know all this information about them. And yeah, so she I don't remember how or when she heard about it, and she's like that with everything. One time we went on a vacation and she kept talking about to Myrtle Beach, and the next year when we were getting ready to go, she just kept talking about this movie theater, and we're like, what are you talking about? Like, we didn't go to a movie theater, there is no movie theater. And then sure enough, we go to the boardwalk area, and there was one of those like Ripley or Nots, like movie theater thing. And we're like, we never even saw that. Like, how just, and she was, 8, 9 at the time. I didn't even know you could even read. Like, I literally didn't even know you could read. How did you know that existed? And I mean, one time we did same thing. She was probably 7, and we were going to Disney, and we were at Animal Kingdom, and we were in line for the safari ride, and she starts to name all the animals that we're going to see, and I was like, yeah, we're going to see those, and at this point I wasn't surprised that she could label all the animals that we would see, because we'd done the ride a handful of times. She has this great memory. Well, we go on the ride and we're waiting, and she says she's like, oh, we're going to see this, and I was like, yep. And then it's the next animal we see, the first animal we see. And then, then she's like this and this. And then I'm like, oh, those are, and then I come to realize that whole time she was telling me all the animals in the order that they show up and that the lady talks about them. And she had remembered that from a year plus when we had been to Disney the last time. Wow. And that was like, and she was like 7. Yeah. So, yeah. So you're going to see things that in autistic children, strengths, memory, things that are just unique to them, that is so cool. And if you can tap into that, that can help them develop even further, correct? Yeah. The main thing definitely is early detection, fighting with your doctor if you need to. I don't know how much of an issue that is nowadays. The main issue is just knowing once you get the diagnosis, find out for your state. In Ohio, if you're in Ohio and you're listening to this, you can reach, every county has a Board of Developmental Disabilities, reach out to them right away, get get your child a social worker right away. Find out, be adamant on what funding can I get for extracurricular, because there's funding for extracurricular things. There's funding for medical help. Some of it is income based. Some of it is not. Some of it is need based. So depending on, how much help your child needs, and just keep pushing, like just keep asking questions. And when, research things of what you want, and, and just keep being the squeaky wheel. Like, how can I get this paid for? Is it through insurance? Is it through, other autism organizations that maybe might provide you with some funding, whatever that could be. There is a lot of help with extracurriculars now. There's a lot of, again, Ohio, in our area, there's quite a bit, but a lot of places I think have that now. A lot of it tends to be subsidized cost or free, or free for need-based families, because most of it is through charity stuff or fundraising organizations. So, it is still important that your child doesn't just live with therapy and work, doing work and learning, but that they have joyful extracurricular things to be a part of. And, Naomi goes to youth group. She has a job now. She rides horses. Yeah. I mean, the girl does a lot. Right now she has basketball, youth group, cheer, dance, and horseback riding. But yeah, those are all important. And then again, with insurance, you need to just keep fighting. One of the things that I learned at the first conference I went to, they talked about was how, in general, insurance companies, if they're an insurance adjuster, they have to meet a certain quota of denials every month. And once they get to a certain time of the month, if they're not close, they'll just start to deny for the dumbest reasons. Yeah. And sometimes for no reason, because studies have shown that 80+% of the time when they send out a denial, nobody pushes back, even if it's something that should have been covered, even for things outside of autism, just in a general situation. And so there was this mom there who, was an autism mom presenting, and she just happened to be an insurance adjuster. And so she gave us that information. She's like, if you get a denial, she's like, don't accept it. Like, keep calling back. And I found that to be true. Not only when I was first fighting for her services to be covered, but even through the years, that, like, depending on who you got, whoever answered the phone. Like, I remember that, there was a time that I would call, and between me and her provider, we were told, a different thing every single time. And then finally, like, my 10th phone call over the course of 2 weeks, I get a person on the phone and I'm just, kind of bitching it up and whatever. And then they're like, well, you could just do this. And I'm like, why has nobody told me
10 phone
that?
calls a day.
Like nobody has mentioned it. It's like, there's just this one form on our website. And if you click it and print it and your doctor signs this, then you could just do that. And I'm like,
Oh my
nobody has
gosh.
told me that. Like I have spent,
Yeah.
10 phone calls, 3 hours,
Yeah.
and nobody said anything like that to me. So a lot of it just is like that repetitiveness of it. And again, I can't stress enough the homeopathic side of it. Cleaning up diet is so important. These kids should not be having processed sugar. Food dyes is like cocaine to Naomi. She'll even say it. Um, as much as you can. It's not even to be fancy or, if you can do organic, great. That'll be so helpful as well. But even if you just give them fruit out of the refrigerator, like stay away from packaged items, stay away from processed food as much as you can. And if you're, a lot of parents, well, all my kids will eat is this. Yes, I get it. And that, that happens a lot. But it also happens because it's just what their body is literally addicted to. And so as you start to not give them that, and even if they don't eat a lot for a week, they're not going to starve themselves. You will see them come around and start to eat what you gave them. And then it becomes like an avalanche, the snowball effect.
Right.
The more that they're eating that way, then the easier it becomes eventually.
Yeah.
So,
and one last thing before we close out, support. You didn't have support, and then you remarried, and it looks like you have a lot of support from Leo.
Yeah.
Because he just accepted Naomi and he just jumped right in with all your kids, but especially with her, he just seems to be the type that he just rolled with whatever was happening and was really helpful. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think in general, not feeling alone in whatever situation you're in. And that was definitely a case with my previous marriage. Like I was married and had somebody with me all the time, but I felt so lonely in general. And then going through this with Naomi, it definitely highlighted, and it definitely is what eventually was, this isn't healthy and I can't be in this situation anymore. And that was a big catalyst of it. People say all the time, the percentages of there is a high percentage divorce rate with families with children with autism, but I don't think it's necessarily, and there's other life challenges they talk about where the percentages go up, and I don't think it's necessarily that you get a divorce because your child had was diagnosed with autism. It becomes hard. The diagnosis or the hard life situation, whatever it could be, just exposes how weak the relationship was to begin with, and it just can't survive. And so I found, my husband and I now, oh my gosh, like we have been challenged, we have been thrown some life whammies, maybe not 100% of the time, but by the end of everything, it actually does bring us closer. We might have gone through situations where we butt heads for a bit. I mean, even right now, we're kind of navigating that with the Tommy situation that has been so challenging for us. Probably the most challenging thing. I shouldn't say the most challenging thing we've dealt with, but it's the thing that has caused the biggest rift between the two of us, and us for the longest period and the most often, like kind of butting heads and misunderstanding one another and what the other one needs, and where we're coming from. The longest for sure. And now, and there's been a lot of communication and a lot of, not communicating to them communicating and all of that. And we're finding our way through it. And we're finding that we're getting back to feeling now like more connected and more together because of it. So I think that it just exposes that. And it's it's still hard in some ways. Like I mentioned, I'm Naomi's person. At the end of the day, of all the providers that she has around us, and her providers at Kids Link, who we've gone back and forth to through the years, are phenomenal.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, and I go to them a lot, I'm always texting them like, I'm having this issue, and can you guys help me figure this out? And how do we tackle this or that, the other thing? And they're great. But there are a lot of situations where it still falls on me, like Naomi's, like job coaches that are with her for part of her shift at Outback. They have all their little techniques or tools and things, but there's just still some days, it happens maybe, once every month or two, where she's just really off. And at the end of the day, like I'm the only person that can still work through it, whether it's because I want to, because my reasons and desires are obviously way deeper than anybody else's would be, or whether just because I have some kind of connection with her that other people obviously don't. But at the end of the day, So it is still a little bit of a heavier load on me, but yeah, no, definitely. And Leo has been instrumental too in another that he's helped with the weight of finding solutions,
Right.
and
Right.
just being open to them. And, he hears something, he's researching it for me and then telling me about it versus like for Naomi initially, like I had to do all of that. I
Yeah.
had to, carry all of that load and be willing to try things, be willing to even argue why we should try things versus, and even when the cost has to come out of essentially Leo's pocket because he's the main provider for our house, it's like, yeah, no, like just if that's going to help her, let's do it. It's worth it,
That's
that sort of
awesome.
thing. So
That's
that makes a
awesome.
big difference for sure.
So I think that's important to mention that if you are taking on the biggest load, you got to find a way to help get help, and make sure you've got a balance somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing I would tell moms too is don't feel guilty about stepping away.
Yeah.
Like as much as our kids need us, as much as we have to do it in general, any mom of any child, even typical children, but especially for children with special needs or
Right.
medical, special needs, like don't feel guilty, whether it's once a year, whether it's once every 6 months, but like have something that is yours, that you get to step away, that you have planned and confirmed so you can look forward to it at all times, to even if it's a year away, but have it like on the calendar. I know this is going to happen
Right.
because that will be like a mental reprieve for you to be able to have that to look forward to anyway. And just don't feel guilty. And another lesson that took me a long time to learn um, and not feel so guilty about was also recognizing when it was best for everybody, including Naomi, to just not have her be a part of something.
Yep.
And we went through a couple of years where she, didn't really do a lot of the family trips because it just wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth all that she went through and her behaviors while we were there. And it wasn't worth it for the other children. And so what I did through those times, because it sounds like I'm contradicting saying pushing through certain things, we had one trip that we did every year, which was Myrtle Beach, but our family is blessed enough and my husband's a great provider, so we do take multiple trips a year, and that was the one trip that no matter what we took her on. And even those first 3 or 4 years were so difficult, and she was having a lot of behaviors, and then we started to bring somebody with us because that way it at least allowed me to step away from her and be a part of everything else with everybody.
Right.
Because the first couple of years with her behaviors, it's like I wasn't even on the same trip as the rest of the
You missed out
family.
on so much, right?
But we did still include her in that. And then she and I did some things on our own. And I would use some of those things to motivate her and push her through other difficult situations. But we did go through a couple of years at the peak of some of her negative behaviors where I learned, and it took me a long time because of guilt. I didn't want her to feel like she was being excluded. I didn't want her to feel like I didn't want to feel like I was excluding her, even if she wasn't necessarily aware of things. Um, and maybe through the first few years, I shouldn't have done that. I don't know. But I definitely got to a place where I was able to start saying, this is a good, way to push Naomi and challenge her and have everybody work together to I know she's going to be successful in this situation. Like, for example, we didn't take her to Vegas because it
Oh,
was going to
Vegas would have been
be
overstimulating.
right. And
Wow.
just now we went to Europe and I asked her if she wanted to go and she kept saying no. So I didn't take her
Yeah.
because the trip was going to be too much. We were jumping around to 6 different cities in Europe in only 9 days
And that's a lot for her.
and a lot of sightseeing, a lot of moving around. There wasn't going to be a lot of downtime. There was no carrot for her. Usually on trips like that, I have to have a big enough carrot for her where it's like, if we're doing something to challenge her, then it's like, well, there's this aquarium that you can go to. So
Right.
at the end of the trip, on the last day, I'll show her the aquarium, which is all about it. Like that's what we did with when we went to the Bahamas. You get to do this because, and then so throughout leading up to that, and I always put it at the end of the trip, then there's a lot of like, hey, you got to stay on green or you got to behave
Right.
this way because otherwise I'm not going to take you to the one park like. So most of our trips, there's usually one day or half a day where her and I kind of do her own thing. That's all about her. Oftentimes it's not what anybody else has any interest in, so it ends up being just her and I. But that would be like a carrot to get her through the rest of the trip.
Yeah.
And if a trip doesn't accommodate that, like the Europe trip wasn't going to accommodate that, the Vegas trip a few years ago, I've learned to be like, it's okay that she doesn't
Yeah.
do this one.
Well, you've done trips without your other kids too, so it's not just
Right.
like her.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to bring them to this because they had this going on or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, as the kids get older, you've just got to do those types of things.
Yeah.
Even
So,
with autistic children, they get
Yeah.
older, she's got all these things she's involved in. Maybe she
She
should stay
does.
home for that, right?
That too.
So those are good decisions.
Yeah.
Those are good
Yeah.
decisions. So,
So,
well, thanks for sharing. I know it was super vulnerable. Appreciate it so much. That's a lot to share. For those of you that are new to this autistic journey, just know that pretty soon you could be like this, because how many years has it been?
it's been 16 years now.
16 years of learning and adjusting and growing, and still,
Yeah.
you're still learning and adjusting and growing.
She was
Never
diagnosed in
stops.
2011, so I guess it'll be 15 years.
Yeah.
But she was 3.5. So.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you guys being with us. We hope that you learned something and hope that you got something out of this. Comment, reply, and again, please like our page and share it with other people. We would love to get more to join us on this journey that we're on. We appreciate you learning more about autism. And Samua, thank you so much for sharing your personal side. I don't really have anything to share with autism except what I've witnessed, which has been amazing. So you kind of took the lead on this one. So thanks.
Well, thank you. And, please share this episode forward to a friend of yours that has somebody in their life with autism, or if they got recently diagnosed with autism. And also feel free to DM us through our Instagram page, The Brian Samua Show. You can find us on Instagram. Feel free to DM us if you have any questions. A lot of things are specific to your state, but anything that I can answer, I'd be happy to.
The other thing too is if you're in the car and you want to listen in the car, I do that a lot with podcasts. I don't necessarily need to see them, but we are on Spotify, The Brian Samua Show. So check us out there if that gives you something to listen to on your way. We'd appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. All right. Take care.